again on politics today. Well, we'll be looking at in-depthly at the election, what happened, how the people voted, the conduct, what INEC did and what INEC did not do. Don't forget, this very election is one that INEC says is going to be like a template for the 2015 election. If it's going to be a template, then how good is this template? Can we fly with it in 2015? Is it good enough for us to live on? Well, I have joining me some of the observers and some of the experts who worked on this particular election. A professor from the Oladele University and observer monitor in this particular university, Professor Oladele Olaofe. Thank you for joining us on politics today. And I have from the Election Monitor Organization, is an NGO who specializes in election and politics. Is Mr. Abiodun Ajilola. Thank you so much for joining us on politics today.
Thank you very much.
Let me start with you, Prof. You are based around here.
That's correct.
You know the people of this place.
That's correct.
There's something that is very interesting that our viewers might want to know. That this very election, a lot of people say that there is massive turnout. But we'll let you know, it's not just saying it, it's in the facts and the figures, as my guest will later reveal to you. What do you think made the people come out in that manner?
People wanted change. It's been in the air for a long time. People have been waiting. There is evidence that there's something they're not happy with, and this is the opportunity, and they aren't going to miss that opportunity. So that was why they had a very, very high turnout. And secondly, because this is the only election around in Ekiti State, so people they're just focused and they want to go and do their civic responsibility. And generally, the attitude in this country, in Ekiti State, is to make sure that they don't let this election pass them by. So for those three reasons, they want to go and vote, and it was a very high turnover.
From the creation of Ekiti State, we've seen it about 5 governorship elections. Ekiti State is quite different politically.
It is.
Elections could turn out violently. But again,
Indeed.
from the mentality of these people that you understand, in this particular election, what has changed about the Ekiti people?
You see, if you go back a little bit, it's not really the people who turn against each other. They are led by politicians. These politicians, they put in everything into it, they expect everything, and they cannot afford to lose. So they are prepared to do anything to win, and they mislead people. So we in Ekiti State, we're quite peace-loving. We know each other virtually, and we are prepared to fight for our rights, but we don't want to be violent. Sorry.
I mean, interesting. You are educated. You are learned in this part of the world.
That's
and again, it makes the people around here a bit strange. We don't really understand so much about you because you look strange. This we saw in this election.
Yeah.
I mean, what was your feeling like? A lot of people say maybe Ekiti people may not want to come out.
Yeah, like I said before, they are prepared to come out because there's something they're not happy with, and they want to make sure that they make it known unreservedly that, look, we're not happy with this. Have you heard Ekiti is the fountain of knowledge? So we are very proud.
Where there is almost a professor
in every household.
Interesting. Let me just cut you for a moment. Let me go to Abiodun Ajilola. The fact remains that we've seen election in other states. Recently, we saw election in Anambra State. We saw also in Ondo State and in Edo State. And the turnout was woeful. But what is different here? Can you give us an understanding into the figures that makes this one different?
Thank you very much. Looking at this election, you can see that clearly the voter turnout was much higher than we've had in previous elections. In fact, I can say it's extremely high. Physically, when you go around, you could see it. But if you look at the figures, for example, we had 733,000 registered voters, taking into consideration the continuous voter registration exercise, which took place earlier in March. Now, of this number, 369,000 were accredited, and 360,455 actually came out to vote. Now, on basic calculation, you find that you get 49.1% voter turnout at that rate. But you have to understand that not everybody out of the total registered voters could have voted yesterday, because if you don't have a permanent voter's card, you will not be able to vote in yesterday's election. So the actual number of people who were able to vote yesterday were those who had a PVC, and they were just about 470-something thousand as of the total number of PVCs collected as of the 17th of June. Now, if you look at how many voted, which is about 360,000, as a ratio to about 470,000 eligible people who have PVCs, you actually have a voter turnout of about 75%. So you actually have about 75% of the population that could have voted yesterday actually coming out to vote, and that is unprecedented. We've never had that.
Even in our general elections,
we've never had general elections.
We've had 33%, 40%,
20%.
in recent.
2011 was 53%, and that was a very high one. But I mean, look at Anambra. Anambra was 27% voter turnout.
Woeful.
In Ondo, it was 40%. We had about 442,000 voters in Anambra out of about 1.7 million registered voters. In the same case in Ondo, we had about 624,000 registered, people that actually voted out of about 1.638 million registered voters. So that's 40%. So you see, what we had in Ekiti yesterday was amazing, was unprecedented.
Did anything change about advocacy and voter education in this sense? Or is it just Ekiti people that came out to vote?
No, I think that there was much more awareness. I think the consciousness has been increasing. I also believe that civil society groups, political parties have been improving in educating and supporting and strengthening their bases. As you know, one of the major parties recently did registration of its party members in the state and across the country. So you see that the parties, the people are actually growing. The continuous voter registration exercise that took place in March earlier this year was actually an exercise that created a sensitization as to the process, and it was clear, without your PVC, you cannot vote. So that was a consciousness. And even the parties, the politicians, when they campaigned, you remember one of the, the person that won the election, Chief Fayose, in his campaign recently, mega rally, he asked everybody to bring out their voters card, and you saw a sea of people bring out their voters card. So even the politicians are beginning to recognize it and encouraging voters that, look, you must have your voters card. And I think all this is contributing to a consciousness among the people.
All right. Again, when I asked the question about awareness, advocacy, education, there's something that is very prevalent in our elections, and is the waste of votes.
Yes.
The rejected vote is always very massive. They are not less than 10%, which is much, I guess. In this particular case, we have about 10,087 rejected votes. That is less than what we've seen in some other elections. But this very one, does it tell about illiteracy or literacy of voters? Okay,
let's look at the figures. You had in 2011 general election about 1,256,000 thereabouts voters who avoided votes across the country, out of about 38 million people that voted. Now, if you look at the percentage here, you have about 10,089 rejected votes. That was across the state. And then you have about 360,455 votes, which were, cast, totally cast. So you have about 2.8% of registered, votes of people who voted that their votes were cancelled for one reason or the other. So that actually is a bit lower than what we've had in some other states in the recent past, which also means that somehow the people have improved the art of thumbprinting properly. And for me, they're getting used to it. It was improved. And sometimes when you see the adverts of some of the candidates, they would actually focus on demonstrate how to thumbprint. Some of them, even in their meetings with people at the community level, they would show them how to thumbprint. So you can see that the political parties are beginning to take that responsibility, because they are primarily responsible for voter education, and that is beginning to happen. Interesting.
Thank you so very much. Prof, tell me, we've seen INEC under Jega from 2011. We're going into 2015. He spent roughly 4 years.
Yes.
Now, tell me, what is different? How would you rate INEC in this very election?
To be very honest, I think they performed very, very well on this occasion. Like my colleague pointed out, the publicity was there, so everybody knew what was coming. And if you look at the process itself, there was registration, there was accreditation, there was the voting proper. And during accreditation, people were explained to how they're going to line up and to vote. And they gave time between accreditation and the voting proper. For the accreditation, you have you bring your card, you have the list of people who are eligible to vote, and then they cross-check your name, and then they give you the card to vote. And then the ballot box itself, I was impressed with that. It was transparent. And when you arrive, they will show you it's empty, and the voting took place right there, so that everybody can see what was going on. I think I would give INEC a very high percentage here.
If you're a professor and you have students, you're a teacher, if you had to give a pass mark, what would you give INEC in this sense?
90%.
Really?
Really.
That's interesting. If you're going to give INEC, if you're going to pass INEC, grade INEC in this election, how would you rate INEC?
Okay, to be very honest with you, in this standalone election, I could give INEC a 75-80%, which is a distinction. Yeah, but in relation to the Anambra election, it was a complete improvement. It was phenomenal. It was much. You cannot compare the two elections. This election is extremely well conducted.
So the embarrassment that INEC saw in Anambra, they learned from it.
It's very clear. They learned from it in so many different ways. One is the timing. INEC always has issues with logistics. Materials never arrive on time. But yesterday, this was not the case. 8 a.m. accreditation started in almost all parts of the state without issues. That was never a problem yesterday, which has been a problem before. Violence. We hardly had issues of violence.
No ballot stuffing.
No ballot stuffing.
No issues of snatching.
That was one issue.
Whether it brings me to the issue of security also. Bro, let me come to you.